Hello, and welcome to Scuttlebutt. Join us as we review war films from the early days of film to today. We are a group of three independent filmmakers, each with diverse backgrounds. I'm Brian.
I'm Peter.
I'm Nathan.
And today we're looking at We Were Soldiers, a 2002 film which depicts the Battle of Ladrang, the first major battle fought during the Vietnam War in the fall of 1965. Nathan, what did you think of the film?
Just throw it right off to me. All right. Um. Oh God, he caught me off guard now. No, it's hard because this film is nostalgia for me. I was 12 years old when it came out. I definitely watched it when I shouldn't have. I was like probably 12 or 13 years old and watching people get blown apart. So that was, hindsight probably not very good. But I have a huge nostalgia thing for this movie, and it's just like it's hard because it's such a fantastic for me. I would have to say it's a fantastic example of a perfect blend of like CG and practical effects, also with really good cinematography of battle scenes and battle setup. They do a really good job of cutting stuff around, but the only thing about this movie that is really pulls me out is the home front aspect, and I get the whole reason. But I'll go into that later. But this movie is pretty good. Has a huge nostalgia thing for me, I think. I guess that'd be my thing. But we can bounce it around and talk a little bit more about it, and we can bounce off. So, Peter, I guess I'll hand off to you.
So Nathan, you said you were 12 when it came out. I would have been probably 1 year old. I was born.
God.
I was born in 1999. I'm 21 years old now. So yeah, I'm a young
At least
man.
you could drink.
You
Yeah, I
said
can drink
it out
now.
loud, and now I feel
said
myself
it.
aging, man. That's harsh. Oh my God.
I've seen it many times. Mel Gibson is one of my favorite actors from around that time period. I have my gripes with war movies in general. I tend to look at older. I tend to like older war movies better. I just think that, it does, like Nathan said, have a lot of nostalgia, and it has a good place in my heart. I thought the acting was good. Like I said, Mel Gibson is a fantastic actor. I just think with that event that took place, I think that Hollywood kind of over dramatizes it a little bit. I think they did a good job. This movie in particular did a good job of portraying the events chronologically as they happen, which I think is good. I understand that Hollywood kind of has an obligation to, meet the standards of the industry and to make the fans and the people who are going to be seeing the movie happy, because not everyone is interested in history. So I still thought it was a very good movie, and like I said, yeah, it's very nostalgic for me. So what about you, Brian?
Well, it's funny because I'm right in the middle of you guys. Born '94, and again, probably to a lot of the listeners, we sound young as fuck. But it's interesting because I remember this film just being played on TNT.
Oh
Like,
my God! Yeah,
forever.
you're absolutely right.
You know?
It was always
It
on
was-
TNT. Yeah.
And just growing up, like this was the Vietnam War film because they couldn't play Platoon or like Apocalypse. They could, but they just had to be so neutered from the put it on TV. It would be like, oh, beginning, boat ride, ending.
And
but
also
this film,
not to interrupt you, Brian, but also that Platoon and Apocalypse Now, they're long. We Were Soldiers is not that long in comparison.
Yeah, I think it's like probably an hour and a half.
Yeah.
Less than that.
I think so.
yeah, true. It wasn't. It was not long as I remember, but again, it's funny to stream movies without ads because you're like, wow,
Right.
Like, when I was a kid, this is 3 hours, but without the Dawn commercials, like, oh, it's not that bad. But no, it's funny. So like, this kind of set the standard for me, growing up for like a Vietnam War film, and again, because they played it so many times, and it's just, I always viewed it as a middle of the road Vietnam film. And coming back to it now, I kind of still agree with that, but it holds up, but it doesn't hold up as much as it, as it used to in my mind. It's funny. There's a lot of the fighting and things. And before we really get into that, though, I mean, Peter, it's funny that you say that this movie was over dramatized in a way, like Hollywood it up, because the guy that directed it, Randall Wallace, so he read the book "We Were Soldiers" by Hal Moore, or "We Were Soldiers and the Young Ones." It's like it's kind of like the title of Doctor Strangelove.
Right.
It's just like How We Learned to Love the Ball. It's like, oh, it's so long, but anyway, he read that book, and in the book, Colonel Moore talks about how Hollywood never got it right, and that kind of pissed off the director, and he was like, really? So that pushed him to kind of get the movie right. Like, he wanted to do practical effects, and he wanted to like go as far as he could correctly to get the film made. And I think he started out with a good goal, kind of like Fury. It's like they really wanted to show the mud and the blood of war, but it's the end product's close, but it's not the real thing. In an interview, Hal Moore did actually say at one point, like 1,000 years after the film came out, like, yeah, they got it right. But I don't know if that was just to appease the director or whatever. Because in total honesty, there's no war film that's ever gotten it right.
Oh, of course
I
not.
mean, and even it's a silly sentiment to say because we're all reenactors. We've reenacted a lot, and we've had a lot of experiences that are close to wartime in whatever way. Sleeping in muddy trenches or a million different aspects of life on the front. But you really don't understand combat unless you partake in it, for any war. And it's just interesting how, Hollywood always tries to portray war in different ways and, quote, get it right. But they always miss the mark. You got to be there to know what happened. And the only good war films are combat reels, made by combat cameramen that were there. I mean, there's some very famous ones from every single war,
and
Vietnam especially.
And people's heads aren't normally getting blown off in those, so they kind of have to, go
True. Yeah, it's like I think the best footage that you can really I mean, again, we grew up in a perpetual war with Afghanistan and Iraq, but Vietnam War newsreels, like the nightly news, especially like the footage from Hue. Where they show U.S. Marines clearing buildings and stuff. And it's like, that's real war, because it is real war. But trying to, like, emulate that with film, it's just, you can get close, but no one has ever yet to cross that threshold. But anyway, it's just interesting, though, that, to reiterate, Peter, that you bring that up, and literally it's like that was the motivation for the director. And in your eyes, obviously he fell short.
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't say that he fell short. I just, and like you said, I mean, you're never going to get the real thing ever. It's always going to be, you're going to look at combat footage and you go, wow, that's way different than what because, war is sitting around for hours and waiting for a buildup, and then something just drastic happens, and then you kind of just rinse and repeat at that point. So, and it's hard to be able to express that in film because, you're trying to meet a certain amount of screen time, and you're trying to tell a story, and you want the story to be exciting, and you want it to, the audience to relate to it. And unfortunately, not the average person hasn't experienced war, so you kind of have this warped impression of what war is actually like. But I think the message that they're trying to deliver is good, and I think that the Battle of La Drang is a really important story during the Vietnam War that people should know about, and I think that prompting it with a movie like this is a good thing. So
it's a good introduction to get to know your history.
For sure.
To bounce off of that. Like I said before, that this movie holds a lot of nostalgia to me because it reminds me of watching a movie probably when I shouldn't, like I said, and watching like that Mel Gibson film where it's just like constant, you know what I mean? And that was something that it's funny to bounce off this. It's like just to compare it to with the only thing close to this kind of like budget and or I guess like it like the same amount of magnitude to have something in film like this would have been Saving Private Ryan, which came out 3 years prior to this. And I was actually looking it up that they were the budget for SPR was $70 million, and the budget for We Were Soldiers is $72 million. And that was very kind of like, wow, okay.
Yeah.
And it's like, but then I thought about it, and I'm like, well, that makes sense, because it's like, they had real freaking planes flying through, dropping like napalm canisters, and or if they weren't, it was very well CG'd in for the canister part. But those planes are real, dive bombing through the napalm, and because you have those really, really cool. That was the thing that this movie really stood out to me, was all the practical effects. I know we had talked about that, but seeing napalm, exploding, or quotation napalm exploding, which is just Michael Bay gas canisters pretty much.
Yeah.
But the fact that the planes were going through, and like they swirl, man, like that was so fucking cool. And then watching like some guy just getting exploded by like a 20 millimeter shell off of a plane or whatever I can't remember the caliber of those planes, but it's like
50 Sky Raiders.
Yeah,
Or
it's just like
A6s,
watching guys just
guy.
like just explode into pieces, and
like the broken arrow scene.
Mm-hmm. And there's just a lot of stuff in that movie that really stood out, and I think it's because my background's more visual effects and CG, so I have an eye for when something is horrendously CG'd or horrendously overdone, and so that's the stuff that really draws me. And watching this movie again after probably almost being like 8-10 years, the practical effects blow me away, man. Like, there's something you just don't see anymore in other movies, like Fury. We all have our qualms about Fury, but it's like they tried to go this very ambitious route, and a lot of Fury is CG. And watching the practical effects play out, even in slow motion, they do a really good job of nailing that. That last scene where they're all charging up the hill, and it's like guys are getting riddled by the Huey. It's like I was freeze framing it, trying to see where I could see the CG, because normally I can spot it like that, and I couldn't see it.
You
and
really
it was just
can.
like, I was like, they really do a job. And kind of cycling back onto the CG stuff, that movie holds up really well for it being what is it now? Almost 20 years, 20-year-old movie.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's Peter basically.
Yeah,
In age.
yeah, it's Peter. Yeah, it's a whole Peter.
One
I mean,
Peter age unit.
I mean, it's just very interesting to see the CG. Like there's some shots like when the planes are taking off of the carriers. Some of the Huey shots are very obviously CG, but having those practical Huey shots in there are really, really good, and all of the pyrotechnics and all of the squibs and trees and stuff, like most of that's real. Where the CG comes in, I think, is more of like the occasional tracer. But all the flares are real, all the lighting is real. That's just really, really cool, and that's something you just don't get in that level of magnitude anymore. So that was what like I said, I think that's what made me gravitate a lot to this movie and kind of keep it close
It's
to my heart in that sense, because it's just such a well done practical movie, like SPR and all that stuff, where it had a lot of practical stuff as well.
It's funny that you bring up SPR, because they were made in the same,
within like 3
period
years
time,
of each
like,
other, 3 to 4 years of each other. Yeah.
I think SPR was 98, 99.
Yeah, 90,
you know?
I think it was 97.
97? So 5-year gap. Yeah.
Wow, that shocked so many people. Like even my father and my grandfather went. My grandfather was a Pacific vet during the Second World War, and he didn't mind the beginning, but like so many people, weren't expecting the horror of Omaha, and then bam, there it is. In a similar token, this is really the first. I wouldn't say family friendly, but it was like the first Vietnam War film in forever. There wasn't a lot in the 90s. You have the 80s films, like Platoon, Apocalypse Now, Hamburger Hill.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's the first Vietnam War past 95.
And the casualties of war was 80s too, but that's another story.
I mean, Hamburger Hill was what, 87? 87.
87, yeah. Great film.
That was probably the last big one, really.
Yeah, so you have this latency period of just like 15 years, and then you have another film, and it's as ambitious as SPR is, but for the Vietnam conflict.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
it's just very interesting, to compare the two. It is the Vietnam War SPR in a way, and it does still stand up to that standard, because another movie that was fucking played all the time on TNT was SPR. The 4-hour version that's got like 2 hours of ads.
Memorial Day, 24 hours.
Yeah. Well, when AMC and TCM and like Spike, oh my God, I'm dating myself now. Spike channel,
Oh God,
they used to play all the. I know, that was like Paramount or something.
Yeah. But
they used to play all the war films, and like it was SPR. We were, all that stuff. But not to burst your bubble, Nathan. So all of the planes that were used in this film, the A6s, or all the bombing scenes with napalm, weren't real. They were taken from another film that was filmed in the 90s, because those planes, they couldn't find any in the world that were still flying. So all those scenes were like flying through smoke, and all the bombings are actually from another movie they filmed like 10 years before.
No way.
Yeah.
I did not know that.
I'll find it for you stuff. Yeah. And that's why it would make sense that you're like, oh, the CGI from taking off the ships. Well, because it had to be. Because they had no
oh my God. That makes sense now. Okay. So then because I know when the napalm was exploding, I obviously knew the guys aren't in the napalm. Like, that's obviously CG. but I meant Fury. It's like any big explosion is a CG thing. Like almost none of it's that kind of stuff. But that blows my mind. Why did I think I knew that in the back of my head, because when you said that, I'm like, why do I remember that? Man, oh wow. What movie was that from then?
I'll have to look it up.
It must have been Paramount then, because Paramount isn't We Were Soldiers Paramount? Isn't that?
I believe it was Paramount.
Yeah, it must have been owned by Paramount, because that's the only
which is now the Spike channel.
Yeah. Like, damn. Okay, well then that would make sense then, because there were. Yeah. You just blew my mind a little bit and burst my bubble. Thank you.
One thing I did kind of want to touch on a little bit. I'm not done. I have. Keep going.
Oh God.
I have my. I'm gonna save it. I'm gonna let you bounce off this, Peter.
Here comes the shoehorn.
But I have my negative things about this movie, and I will dish them out.
But just to get this thought done, the A6 intruder footage was originally shot for Flight of the Intruder in 1991. This was necessary because the A6 had been retired several years before this film was made. And so none were available to use in the movie.
I would have thought there'd be some discrepancies with the types of cameras they were using, or even just the lighting or anything. I guess they just went all out. That's really interesting. But yeah, anyway, I mean, primarily what I like to focus on in a movie is, I think that CGI and effects are great, but you can make a war movie, but you could end up making Michael Bay's Pearl Harbor. It's not. Everyone's gonna think oh, those explosions were cool, but what the fuck did I just watch? That was terrible.
Yeah. Compare it. Like if you watch Pearl Harbor now, the CGI makes you just turn inside out.
Yeah.
I mean, it's terrible, and it's only a year, 2 years before that. 01, so it's a year before that, and the CG's terrible. I can't even watch that movie. It's
So yeah, Peter, just to build on that point, I think it was Act of Valor that came out a few years ago about the Navy SEALs, fighting against a terror group. I might be getting that wrong.
Was it? I don't think I've heard of that now.
Really, it was a pretty big. 2012 came out, and it's about Navy SEAls. It's basically made by the Navy Department to recruit people into Navy SEAls.
Gotcha.
But
dun.
Yeah, and they're it's Navy SEALs hunting, just Navy SEAls doing Navy SEAL stuff, but they didn't have like real actors. They used like real Navy SEALs, so the acting is terrible.
Yeah,
the combat scenes are great, because it's like Navy SEALs doing what they do, But when it comes to the acting, there's like a horrible beach party scene where like they're on the beach and they're talking about stuff, and they're like, "Pass me a hot dog, Jeff." It's like, "Sure, buddy," and it's like you could tell it's just like. There's a guy in the background just like, eating his fist. He's like, fucking just act like, be nonchalant. But yeah, props don't make movies. You need a story. The script is the bedrock of everything.
Oh, for sure.
And that's really what's got to carry it along. Even the worst, cheap movies or shorts out there are good because they just have very strong narratives.
Oh yeah, for sure. And what I thought was most interesting about We Were Soldiers is Mel Gibson at the time actually was jumping back and forth between sets on Signs, which Signs is like one of my all-time favorite movies. I think Signs was released in 2002. They started filming in 2000. So, and from what I've heard from actors who have worked with M. Night Shyamalan, who directed Signs, is that he's a very emotional person, and he really does express that in his narratives, like The Sixth Sense. Like they're great stories, and I think that while Mel Gibson was, making Signs with M. Night Shyamalan and going back to We Were Soldiers, I think that a lot of that emotion that he experienced on the set of Signs reflected positively on the set of We Were Soldiers, which is why I think he did so well. And with that, being said, the story, of the Battle of La Drang, I think that the story written around that was pretty strong. I think that that being like, what was it, the first major American battle of the Vietnam War. So there's got to be some emotion behind that. So
good point. And sorry, Nathan.
No,
in America too, the Vietnam War is so decisive, even till today. I mean, it's kind of after the Ken Burns documentary and things. I feel like temperatures cooled down, but every single movie about the Vietnam War, I would even say, except for We Were Soldiers, has a negative view of the conflict. Platoon, not to rename all the films we talked about earlier, but like Hamburger Hill, Apocalypse Now, it's all like a negative context for the war, which is a very realistic one. But We Were Soldiers it kind of takes a different step because you get the home front in it, and it's kind of an interesting way to look at it. Not from just like, you are in country, oh, buck up or you're going to die. It's like, oh, we're at home and then we're going to this war. And then because it's the first battle, so it's interesting build-up. It's the best that they could have done, instead of just being like, here's the first Cav in Vietnam, doing Vietnam, and then they're going to go, attack a hill. So I see what you mean about that emotion,
Mm-hmm.
And it's really one of the only films where you have that with Vietnam, where it's not just you're hating it the whole time. And it's like, oh, everything's horrible and it's only getting worse. And then, oh, you died. So it's this interesting viewpoint.
Yeah, and there's certainly controversy surrounding the Vietnam War. I mean, I know there were, you think that there were World War II movies that were made during World War II, but there were no Vietnam movies that were made during Vietnam, especially towards the end, because no one wanted to talk about it, especially into the 1970s, and nobody wanted to just address the fact that, we were like, oh shit, that happened. And
you get a lot of interesting like short films and counterculture films in the early 70s, early 60s that like star Vietnam vets. There's a really good one called Vanishing Point, and it's about this Vietnam vet that's like just got home and he's driving across the country like on a heroin sale. He's like 24 hours to drive from New York to San Fran to drop off his heroin, and he's being chased by cops the whole time. And it's just like an interesting look into that era. And so even with Taxi Driver too, you get
I was literally about to say Taxi Driver.
you have like again a Vietnam vet. It's so you don't have movies about Vietnam, but you have movies about like the effects of it. And just like in American culture or the culture of the United States at the time. And there was a lot of documentaries too that would at the time they would talk a lot about like the drug use and the things that the vets brought back with them that weren't so good. And I think the only real show that touched on it, well, there's a bunch at the time, but All in the Family, they had the dichotomy with Archie Bunker, and the son-in-law. He was a conservative, and then the son was a liberal, and they would talk about Vietnam all the time. And it's like you could go watch ABC News about the Marines at Hue, and then change the channel and watch about a family sitcom talking about the war too. So, everybody really they were only talking about the negative aspects of it and the horror. Nobody wanted to emulate that. So you just have this, I think Platoon probably was, or it had to be Apocalypse Now, because Apocalypse Now was 79.
It was 79, yeah.
Yeah, so that's like the first time that you have Vietnam on film.
Oh, yeah. He got in at the right time, too, because, it was such a brilliant... Not only was it just, like, the whole movie was an analogy for Heart of Darkness, but, it was just such a brilliant take on just the war genre in general, because that's like the movie. I don't even consider it to be a war movie. I think it's more than that.
Have you seen Agure, The Wrath of God by Werner Herzog?
I have not. No.
That movie heavily inspired Coppola in filming and how he shot Apocalypse Now. And
Really?
It's a very amazing, very vivid film, and it's one of Werner Herzog's first films, and it's about this group of conquistadors that's looking for El Dorado, and they are climbing through the Andes, and the movie starts with them climbing out of the Andes and going into the Amazon. And the Amazon at that time, it was the late 1500s. It was like unknown to the whole world, and it's just about like this group of Spaniards going insane in the world's biggest rainforest. And it's very vivid. It's on Amazon for free. Do it. Anybody who hasn't seen it, who's listening to this, Agure, The Wrath of God, definitely worth a watch. It's a low-budget film from the 70s, but it's fascinating. All practical, filmed on site in Peru, just spectacular. And when you watch it, you see how like the shots in Apocalypse Now and just like the vividness, especially like the colors, because you have like the lush jungle and then like the brown, Amazon River. That's kind of emulated by Coppola in Apocalypse Now. Like for me, I especially see it when they have the scene where they're going through the town and there's all the fighting going on. And so that's when they meet up with the first cav, they're just before the whole air assault that everybody's seen ever. And you have like the burning villages and you have the red clay of the soil. And it's just like this very, bright just shot, and you have the green, the lushness of the jungle, and it's just like they're muted colors, but they're just vivid, and that's like exactly what you see in Agure, The Wrath of God, just like the exact same style of filming. But
I will definitely check that out then. Yeah, that's awesome.
Highly recommend it. Yeah, it's very good. A lot of Werner Herzog stuff is great. Especially his documentaries.
Just bouncing off of that, Brian, just to pull it back to We Were Soldiers in the sense of
take it back now, y'all.
The filming location they filmed in Georgia and California, which is fairly noticeable. I feel like, because
it didn't seem very tropical to me.
Well, it's very tropical, but which I believe that's like when the squad gets cut off. I believe that's Georgia. But, like, if you look at the landing zone areas, that's all California. And especially when the fucking French get ambushed in the beginning, that's California to a T.
I hate that scene.
Yeah.
Why?
I thought it was kind of unnecessary.
Why, just to bitch slap the French, or like what?
Well, let's let Nathan finish his comment, and then
I got
a lot to say.
In terms, we'll to bounce off your comment about like the red. We'll go in the negatives right after this. How about that? Because we got to keep it going. But we'll go off negatives off of this. But the thing that you had mentioned about like the red clay and all that kind of stuff and stuff that I've seen in Hamburger Hill and stuff like that, like. That stuff was filmed on location, if not close to that location of the world. At least I think so, unless they really did a good job not, fooling me. But that was the one thing that about We Were Soldiers that really I always kind of look at. It's like it looks too much like California, and that was just my little more like desert California, especially like the creek bed and stuff like that. But all in all, I think they did a very good job, showing that the landing zone is like the hub, and especially like the termite mound. That's also, the cool little area. But like it's I think they do a very good job, even though it does look like California. It does look like the United States. I think they do a very good job of like representing like the landing zone is like the lifeline. And that landing zone does look like that area to a certain extent.
I think that they actually did take like a valley in California and plant a bunch of shrubs. Because I was reading a bit about it, and they couldn't find an accurate place to film it. So
that would make sense. It also supports Peter's fact about switching in between signs and that, because that would make sense. Because international travel would have been a bitch.
Well, not COVID, but yeah.
Well, no, not COVID, yeah, but like international travel, like, even in 2001 while they're filming it would be kind of a bitch if you had to go from like Vietnam to fucking like like South Dakota where the hell Signs was filmed. I don't even remember.
Signs was set in It was set in Pennsylvania, and I believe they actually did film it in Pennsylvania. Yeah.
Set in Pennsylvania?
That would make sense. That makes
Bucks,
sense.
Bucks County, Pennsylvania.
I also
Corn
haven't.
country?
I also haven't seen Signs since I think it came out, and I watched it on a tiny little TV in someone's sailboat because I'm from a sailing town.
Oh,
and
really?
I was the only way I could watch it was on a tiny TV because I'm a big scaredy cat with horror movies, and it felt too much like a horror movie to me. And I was like, nope. I haven't watched it since then. It's on Amazon right now. I should really face my fears.
Everybody hates the ending.
If everyone tells me to watch it, if people want to tell me to watch it, I'll watch it.
Watch it.
I haven't.
For
I
sure.
haven't.
Peter,
I haven't watched it in like 20-some years.
Peter just loves it so much. He's like has water bottles all over his house.
Yeah, I gotta be prepared.
I remember the water bottles. I remember like the fucking tinfoil hats.
The only scary part I think for me, I don't know, because it gets a bad rap. That's a movie we could talk about another day, but it's not really a war film.
Yeah.
But the scene like in the movie where they have the recording from the birthday party.
Oh.
And there's an alien.
Oh yeah.
That was really cool. Because it's, I mean, say what we will.
And when
like,
Peter was like, what, a fetus? Too?
I was well, it came out in 2001, so I was older than I was about to. Yeah, what stage was that? I think it's just like, the fact that it's such a catastrophic global event, but it only centers around this one tiny family on a little farm in the middle of nowhere. And, I mean, you could even... We were soldiers is kind of the complete opposite. You've got this massive historical event
that's very
that encompasses
isolated.
But it's very isolated, and it's in the middle of the jungle, in the middle of nowhere. That a lot of these guys didn't even know where this place was. Like they were like, "What the hell's Vietnam?" I'm sure, I'm sure they were all briefed on it, but a lot before that, who knows?
Any big event is personal to you because it's how you experienced it.
Yeah.
So that's kind of an interesting point, and not to talk about science.
Well, not 9/11. Peter wasn't even fucking conscious at that point.
No, he was.
Yeah, I was born in 1999, so I would have been 2. Yeah.
2. Yeah, I was
3.
12 or 1. No, sorry, I was 11 at that point. So yeah,
old bastard.
But every major event is personal to the person going through it because it's just how they experience it. Every Vietnam War experience is different from the last because everyone has their own personal war that they had to fight, So it's interesting to take a big event like that and then make it so personal. And to touch on this with We Were Soldiers, you have Galloway, this reporter guy, blah, 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 shooting the war. And then all of a sudden he's in the war, and especially because it's the first a real big battle in the conflict, it's up to that point, fighting like this hadn't been seen. So, wars is personal to everyone, and it's just what they take away from it, from what they experienced, and that's their version of the war. Because you'll have Vietnam vets, I've met tons of them through just my history, reenacting, whatever. And, they all say that, oh, we never wore our jungle jackets like that. We did it like this. And it's like, well, that's because he was there in 66 and you were there in 70.
Yeah.
It's like that your war is your own experience that you brought home with you. Even with the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, a guy that was in Baghdad in 2003 liberating the city had a much different experience than a guy there in 2007 fighting, one of the in the actual Civil War, one of the surges or whatever. Compared to I have friends that were in Afghanistan in 2001 compared to friends that were there in 2015. It's your war, your personalization of your experiences.
Yeah. And even and with that said, I mean, you have different time periods, and obviously war changes very rapidly. But you have even the person's own individual interpretation, like J.R.R. Tolkien in World War I. You think that guy, the war inspired him to write, The Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings and this whole series of books. That guy must have just been in his own just universe, just thinking up of all these ideas. And it's you got to think of what some of these other guys up into Vietnam and beyond that, what they were thinking, and what ideas and whether positive or negative they took away from all those experiences.
Well, we all deal with trauma differently. I know that the book A Catcher in a Rye was written in a foxhole during the Second World War. The writer literally was freezing to death in the Battle of the Bulge, and he was writing it in his head, and that was his escape. to get away from this horrible thing I'm experiencing. Like, I'm going to write a book.
Yeah.
Like, this, what keeps you sane in times of crisis? And actually to touch on a few of the things we've been talking about, 9/11, I guess. One of the lieutenants that was at Ladrang, and he's in a lot of famous film footage. I think he's the guy that, like, at the end of the battle, he's holding an AK, like, looking at it.
Right, yeah.
And there's a good interview with him, and he was like, I was so fucking exhausted. I was up for 4 days. Like, I couldn't walk. I was so, like, all I could do was look at something. So that's why he's, like, sitting down looking at a gun, because he's just, like, he can't do anything else. He's so exhausted. But I believe he, or one of his compatriots who was an officer, he was in charge of the security for the Morgan Stanley office in the World Trade Center, and he ended up dying in those attacks. And there's a very famous thing with him where they were going down the stairs from whatever floor they were on. I think they were just below where one of the planes hit, and all these people were afraid. They didn't know what was going on, and he just started singing the national anthem, and all these other people started singing the national anthem. Then you have like 2,000 people going down a staircase singing the national anthem, and it calmed everybody down, and it got them to the lobby, and it saved their lives. You just got to wonder, like, did he do that in Ladrang? Was that a way that he just, like, oh my God, like, how am I going to deal with this, imminent death or whatever? Like, what do you do in a time of crisis?
Yeah, it's like you have to realize why you're there, because I think some people, the problem with why these guys are in these horrible situations and they lose their lives or whatever is that they kind of lose their sense of purpose and they forget why they're there in the first place. And it's like, and there could be any number of reasons, but I think for a lot of them it's like they're just proud to be Americans. Like, they just had, probably a lot of them had strong national identity, and I'm sure a lot of them were despite going through such a horrible thing. Yeah, like any country, exactly. Like
I actually, spinning off of that, to what to take exactly what you said, I believe in all that. I have pride in where I was born and what I do and where I live, I guess. But I fucking hate the fucking squad dying on that fucking hill going, I'm so glad I could die for my country. Tell my wife
yeah.
I love her.
Yeah.
I fucking hate that. It's so cliche. It's every Hollywood war bullshit. I
totally agree.
It cringes me.
Tell my miss her apple pie.
Like you had that. It's like you had that in the hand, or you had that in your hand, and then you just smashed it against the wall with cliche. Yeah. Like, just fucking, oh my God. Like, it's like, a dying scene is, if you're going to do it cliche, at least do it Wade from Saving Private Ryan. That's emotional. Not a fucking,
oh yeah, Wade's
I wish
was
I could
perfect.
die for my, I wish I could die for my, I'm glad I could die for my country. Ugh. Tell
it's
my
like,
wife I love her.
I think that mentality of like I'm glad I died for my country, like, is always going to come, or like, I witnessed this, I did this for my country. It's going to come after that
right.
whole,
But
someone dies.
But see, you could maybe tie that into the negative of that movie, of the negative of Vietnam as well.
Yeah.
Because it's like, they're trying, I understand why they fucking did it, but it just doesn't, it doesn't take away the fact that it's so fucking awful. That is the one thing that well, let's get on the negatives. I'm already there, so let's fucking I've been holding this in, okay?
Switching gears.
It's that fucking thing of,
I just want to add,
go for it.
Just about the whole, Hollywood really gets death scenes wrong. I mean, not that I've seen a lot of them, but growing up I've always been curious just to real human footage, and I watch a lot of Vietnam War footage and stuff, and I try to listen to real conversations when I write my own scripts. And I was caught a random clip on like National Geographic a few weeks ago about like these drug dealers fighting FARC in Colombia, and they're on a patrol and they get hit with like a withering crossfire, and they're all on the ground. And this one dude takes like 4 bolts to his chest, and he's bleeding out, and he's dying, and all his last words were "Fuck, they killed me," and he's dead. Not like, oh, I fought for my Bogota village. It's like, it's just the realization that like, oh my God, I'm shot, and that's all that your shock lasts for, you know.
Yeah.
So like real deal last, you know, sentences are just very practical, very like situational, you know.
Yeah.
You most of the time, unless you're lingering, and this is a horrible conversation just to contemplate and stuff, but like, you know, you're not gonna have the time to reflect and think about that, you
Right.
know? It's not like the Psalm where it's like, we're going over the top, boys. Here's my letter to my wife.
Right.
My adjutant's gonna send it. You know, tell her she's a bitch. It's like, you know, it's like, it's not like that. It's like, you know, it's just a human realizing what's happened to them, and then okay, it's
like
gone.
I do not doubt that is something that someone has done. I absolutely, totally get that. It just, I don't know. It rubs me.
It's a little propaganda-ish.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was trying to say. Thank you, Peter. I was trying to find the words. It feels like propaganda, like this is an American movie and we're going to do American things and we're proud because, you know, California, fucking country, apple pie, like, country. And, like, exactly what you just said. It's just like that. It just felt very forced. It felt like, okay, we need a patriotic line to get the rednecks all jumped up and hollered and, you know, wet dream and all that kind of stuff. Let's go. Country.
You kind of have to expect that from war movies, especially around that time. Like, there wasn't really, like, an artistic take on
You know
war
what?
movies.
You know what? You just said it. That's riding off of 9/11.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
You just said
Patriot
it. Okay, that makes
The Patriot
okay. The Patriot.
Oh, but if you want to talk about propaganda, like bullshit, I mean, you look at like every Russian war movie that comes out nowadays.
Oh, I know. Oh, I know. Yeah, they're just
well,
guilty
to counter
of it,
that though,
worse.
not to go with a commie trope, you know.
No,
every
I take a
American film
very
Better
neutral
red than
stance.
dead.
like the Battle of San Pietro, probably
Or
one
better
of the
dead than
best
red. There we go.
filmed Second World War like docudrama movies. It was all propaganda.
Yeah.
It was all shot like 2 weeks after the battle, you know, with like just random combat footage and stuff.
Red Dawn.
And yeah, you know, like all of those wartime movies, just it's all state propaganda. You know, people are always quick to forget that the West had propaganda too. Like,
Oh
you know,
my
we're
God.
fighting
We
the war,
still
we keep
have
them
fucking
proud.
propaganda.
yeah.
What do you mean we did?
Well, no,
We
but I'm
still
just yeah. But I just everyone is like, oh well, you know those goddamn communist red sons of. It's like, oh my God, dude. Like, you know, there's two sides to every coin.
Yeah.
Oh, for
so-
sure.
I just want to counter that.
Writing.
Shoot it down wherever you can.
No, that's fine. Writing off another negative, something that I cannot watch. I've watched this movie 3 times this last week because I wanted to really kind of. Well, I like the last 2 times I was like cleaning and having it on the background so I could just keep an eye on it and see if there's anything else I missed. But like, I had to physically skip that fucking scene with all the wives together in a room and her going, I don't understand. It said whites only. Like, how am I supposed to launder? I'm like, what?
Yeah.
Fucking rock have you been living under your whole entire fucking life? You literally, like a 23-year-old woman, you should know what the fuck this is.
Yeah.
And like that is so. I understand the reason why to put it in there, because it's something that our world had not been used to since, you know, segregation and all that stuff. And it's like, you know, I understand the reason why. You just could have picked a different way to do it other than a dumb hick going, I don't understand. They said just whites only. Like,
Yeah.
how am I supposed to launder my clothes? Like,
I would have.
on.
Yeah.
I have to skip it. I'm just like, this is
The home front
can't do it.
scenes were interesting for a few points. First, it was interesting to see a 60s, you know, home front for the Vietnam War, where they're not like, you know, FTA, you know, like screw the war or like we shouldn't be in it because it's so early on. It was really cool to see Western Union delivering the KIA and WIA notices. People probably don't know this, but that was the service that did it from World War I, World War II. I mean, I think even till today, Western Union always delivered the killed in action and the wounded in action notices. And during the Second World War, the uniform for the Western Union guys was green, They would be bicycle guys because rationing or whatever. And like women would see them and run away. Like, they're like, no, you're not pinning that on me. Like, no, fuck you. There's actually a really good scene in A League of Their Own where like this, they're in the locker room and this Western Union boy walks in and all these women are like, oh God, no, not me. And the guy's like fumbling with the letters like, oh, who's this name? And it's just, you could see the look of terror on their faces. So it was very interesting to have that, especially like in a Vietnam War context, because, we can all see a million dudes get shot on screen and, I died for Uncle Sam. But to see the, telegraph come home and just the horror on the wives' faces is interesting.
Those scenes are fine. I'm not. I hope I want to make sure I clarify. I'm not bitching about those. I'm just bitching about that one scene.
Oh well, here's where I'm agreeing with you though.
Oh, okay.
So, but that token, especially today in the post George Floyd era, we are having a reckoning on just America's past as far as social relations, and it's just hard for a lot of people to come to terms with how bad it was for certain segments of the population for so long. Asians, and it's unfortunately again today that's happening, with all this horrible Asian crimes and hate for no reason. But, black and brown people during the time of this film just were shit on for just the color of the skin. So to approach that, and especially if you think about it, people that wrote this are all white. So they're trying to approach it from a viewpoint where it's not as bad as it was, but there's like no medium ground here. It's just they made it like that because there's really no right answer, but they wanted to include it. At least how I saw it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, you could go full Jim Crow South and just show how horrible it was,
right.
But what purpose does that serve? I don't think that the scene was good. I'm not justifying it, but it's just a very hard subject, and especially for Americans to tackle because it's, the Vietnam War is such a tangled up piece of shit as far as U.S. history and how many, just things are built into it when you talk about the subject. It's not something you're talking about at a party. Like, oh, what's up, Jeff? Oh, well, I was thinking about how horrible Hawaii was, or, it's not a subject you bring up. Like it's like the equivalent of it, just like, how's your dead wife doing? It just doesn't work. And the same thing for our troubled racial relations in our past. It's just like it's not something you want to bring up at a party.
No.
So
yeah. And
there's no good way to do it.
And kind of politics aside, but kind of on that note, I think that the way the story was portrayed almost kind of tried to encompass too much of what was going on during that time period, like having the whole home front aspect of it. I think I would have loved the movie a lot more if it focused on just like one character's experience, kind of like how Sam Mendes filmed Jarhead. I mean, he was just focusing on Swofford, which Swofford was a real guy. Like, he was a real scout sniper in the Marine Corps. I almost think that if they did that, like, say, for Mel Gibson's character, or even just some private first class who was in the Battle of La Drang, just focusing on him and his individual experience and his interpretation of what was going on then, I almost feel like that probably would have, hit the nail on the head a little harder with what they were trying to express with the movie.
It did jump around a lot because you have Galloway, you have Moore, you have Plumlee, awesome, by the way.
Sir.
And played so well.
Custard was a pussy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
The name, I think Sam Elliott, I'm probably getting that wrong, but the actor that plays him is so good. That's the guy from he's the cowboy in Big Lebowski. Just so good.
Yeah, he is. I forgot. Yeah, that was also coming off of Wild Herb, or the Wild Herb thing. He's one of the brothers.
That's right. Yeah, or Tombstone, right?
Tombstone. Thank you. Yeah, I couldn't. Yeah. Now is that Wild Herb, or am I totally wrong?
That's the Earp Brothers.
Okay, they're brothers. Yeah. Because like that he in my mind he's Plumlee. He's always been Plumlee. And like writing good dialogue for something like that. I get it. He's a very two-cut, black and white kind of character. It's old, rough, fucking World War II vet. Now done Korea and then Vietnam. So I get it. It's a lot less
World War II too, I think.
Yeah, I said World War II. Yeah, it was World War II and Korea.
Oh, I heard Korea.
Yeah. Well, World War II, Korea, and now Vietnam.
Guy.
and because he has an 82nd Airborne patch on his uniform.
I think Sicily was his first jump.
It was Sicily. I think in the line is like Sicily, something else, Normandy, and then
Salerno.
He has 4 jumps, so whatever that is.
Well, that's how many the airborne ASIC can have.
Yeah.
Except
Yeah. I mean, he has such great lines like, like, how do you know what kind of goddamn day it is, and what are you, the fucking weatherman?
My favorite, that was great. That's being around Army guys my whole life too. Like
it's so nails a top sergeant. So that it nails it perfectly. I mean, whoever was writing that definitely knew Army guys to the T, especially World War II vets. I feel like
my favorite line from him is
meeting a ton of them in my life,
and he was like, I'm not going to carry one of those pieces of crap. He's talking about the M16. And he's like, if I need one, there'll be enough lying around.
The Mattel 16.
Yeah, that's a combat vet. Yeah, the Mattel toy. But it's funny. I guess when the director wrote the script for this, he had that actor in mind for that role. He was like, no one else can play him. Like, if I cannot cast Sam Elliott as, Plumlee, then I'm not going to make the movie. It was literally like a hard stop for him. And
I would have to agree with him on that because I can't see anyone else playing
too. There's not many people who could pull it off.
Yeah.
And apparently the actor and the Plumlee family got really close because, this is back 20 years ago when World War II got
Plumlee, the real Plumlee died. I looked it up. The real Plumlee died in 2012. So he had about 12 years after. Of relationship with the family, I believe, and I also looked up that Colonel Hal Moore died in 2017.
I remember that, yeah. Unfortunately,
and Joe Galloway's still alive. Weirdly, I guess we're at random. I guess we'll go to random facts real quick, and then we'll jump back into where we're kind of trying to steer ourselves going. But Joe Galloway married for about 5 years, I think. No. Yeah, about 5 years. I'm trying to. You probably wouldn't know the name. Tom Mazurk is the real guy, and he was played by the guy in. That was another thing with looking back at this movie and realizing how many starter roles there are for main stars in major movies recently.
John Hamm,
the guy who was next to John Hamm on the radio is the captain who gets shot in the helicopter and he after giving up his seat. That guy, the guy who plays in the Marvel, he was the Marvel he was the agent starting up the Marvel universe of all those movies.
Oh damn!
I can't remember his name.
Didn't know that.
But it's the guy who gives up his seat and then he gets shot and then they grab him and he flies away, but he's dead. That guy's daughter married Joe Galloway for 5 years after a reunion.
Wow.
Which was that's a huge age gap if I do my math right. It's about 20 years of an age gap.
There's somebody at my work who, her husband is 13 years older than she is. It's the general rule is 5, but love is love.
Right. I mean, like I read that and I was like, I wonder if they're still together. And I looked it up and it was like, nope, 5 years later, it's divorce. And now he's married to, I think a Vietnam woman. But he's
Vietnamese.
Thank you. Yeah, he's Joe Galloway's funny. He got pulled over by one of our
that's right.
Common
friends.
About
that.
Yeah, he got pulled over and he our friend took his ID and he's like, oh shit, this is Joe Galloway.
Well, didn't he write him a ticket?
He wrote him a ticket. Yeah, he wrote him a ticket. That was it. He wrote him a ticket, and then he realized who it was, and I believe he tore it up and said, "You're totally fine. It was a minor offense. I'm an idiot." You can.
Yeah, he pulled him over again.
Yeah,
let him pull him over, gave him the ticket, and then his dispatcher was like, "You idiot! You just gave Joe Galloway a speeding ticket."
Right, I forgot.
And he's like,
that.
"Oh, I fucked up." And then he pulled him over again, and Galloway was like, "What are you doing?" And he goes, "I'm sorry, sir." And he ripped up his ticket.
That's right. That was it. That was what made it hilarious, right?
Yeah. It was just like, and he's a Vietnam. Well, not he's a story, like a historian as well. So it's funny that he would screw that up. I mean, we all get things wrong, but
I mean,
getting pulled over by a cop twice, that's never a good thing.
Yeah, we all have so much history in our heads. Some of it falls out. So it's
true.
It's fine. But yeah, I mean, like, that was one of the cool things of doing a deep dive on stuff. But I don't know. I'm trying to rack my brain if there's anything else.
Well, I know that Nathan, you like this, and for those that don't know, Nathan is a huge Mel Gibson fan, and especially the 1980s series of films, Lethal Weapon.
Do you really want to jump?
Do you want to recall? There's an interesting connection between this film and one of the Lethal Weapons. In I forget which film, the character that Mel Gibson plays says, "I fought in the Battle of Ladrang, and my buddy took a bayonet for me."
Yeah, that's Murtaugh. Murtaugh took yes. Oh, that's right. Yeah, you're right. Holy crap! Yep. I just made that connection. Yeah, Murtaugh, buddy, who is the father of the woman who jumps out of the building. Sorry, this is kind of like my life right now. So this is like all Lethal Weapons, all
jump out of a building.
Yeah. Oh god, dude, when I'm fucking 8 years old and I see titties flying, all right, like that's the first thing I gravitate to when you're 8 years old. All right, so but
1998 was a spectacular year.
But no, I've had to contain myself. I'm a huge Mel Gibson fan, Peter. So there you go. I'm siding with you on that.
There we go.
But yeah, no, like Lethal Weapon and me are pretty. It's always funny because Mel Gibson being in a Vietnam movie always makes me laugh because it's just like I'm always thinking about him being a sniper from Lethal Weapon. Yeah. I love those movies. I don't want to start talking because they won't get me shut up. But I fucking love those movies. Those movies are fantastic, and people can yell.
Let's keep it to one Mel Gibson film.
Yeah. We can go back to historical inaccuracies. We can talk about Braveheart. We can talk about Apocalypse Now. We can talk about Hacksaw Ridge. We can talk about. Well, Mad Max isn't a historical film, at least not yet.
Freedom.
Yeah. Or Sterling Bridge without a fucking bridge.
Do you even bridge?
Do you even bridge, bro?
Oh, Gallipoli. I mean,
he wants treats.
That's
God, I just okay, yeah.
Brian and I have talked about this.
I just rewatched that right after we were soldiers. It recommended Gallipoli. I was like, I've never seen this. I was like, I'm gonna watch it. I was like,
by New Order.
And I was ready. I was like, I remember Brian telling me the soundtrack. The music's really bad. I was like, it can't be that bad. And then I was like, it got back to like it went through the what are they called? They're called Simps or no, not Simps. That's a different thing. Simps. Yeah, Simps or something different. What's the thing that you put your hand in between and changes the electronic?
Oh, like a heart or a
SYNTH.
Say it again.
No, you talk about the thing that you like hover your hand in between and it changes the pitch. It's like a harmonic.
Oh, that's an old instrument too.
Yeah, no, it's super old.
Like the 50s. Yeah.
So I'm a huge synth guy. Like I love old classic synth. I love synth. Now.
I want an MS-20 so bad.
Oh my god. Dude,
I used to play one. My buddy had one. So cool.
They're fun.
The fucking time. The scene though, he's running trying to save his friend. It's like. Ding, ding, ding,
I just think it's so interesting. I don't know. It sounds bad, but like it's so
higher. It's so much louder than the rest of the.
It is.
We'll have to review that in the future.
Yeah,
for sure.
Write that down.
Yeah. And you add a Mel Gibson scream, a guttural scream to any movie. I'm just like, yes. Ugh.
I almost think it's so bad that I also love it. Like I don't know. There's something about it.
It wasn't a bad. Well, the music was bad,
Man.
but like if this then we'll end.
Well, I thought it was a good movie also, but
the movie is fantastic.
Oh,
I loved the movie. I loved everything about it, even though it was sometimes slow and. But like I didn't get bored. Like there's some dialogue when slow movies goes, you're just like, oh my god, Facebook, hello, phone, here we go. But like I never like got bored of the movie. The ending though, I was not ready for. I was not expecting that. I was like, he's gonna make it.
Nope.
That's Gallipoli for you.
Nobody
makes it out.
What were those little like water pressure things they made when they were doing their massive retreat? I forgot. There was a name for it.
Water pressure thing?
It was this. So it was when the Australians and the Brits were on that massive retreat when they were withdrawing from Gallipoli, they set up a bunch of SMLEs on the edge of the trenches, and they had
that's right.
They
Yeah.
poured water. They had water drip into a cup, and it would like activate. So it tricked the Ottomans into
this is like a real This is a real historical fact.
Yeah.
It's something that I don't know anything about. Okay.
I
don't know anything about Gallipoli.
The campaign was shitty, but then the retreat was amazing.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. The Brits really know how to pull out, I tell you.
They really do.
Sex joke.
Look at the Falcons. But before they took it back. But I think we could talk about this stuff for hours, So let's just try to, bring it back to We Were Soldiers. So overall, out of 10 being, the best movie ever in your opinion, and I could say any number of films, and that means a different thing to all of us. So just, 10 is the most pure movie making thing you could think of. 1 is the worst. How do you guys rate this film?
Pierre, I'll hand it off to you.
If I had to give it my honest rating, I'd probably give it a solid 6. And that's probably on a good day. I just think mostly due to the fact that it was one of the first war movies I ever saw. I just think that maybe the writing and just how the movie. I almost wish the movie wasn't written around the the whole war and patriotism aspect of it rather than the actual stories that that these soldiers had. So yeah, I'd say probably a 6.
Nathan?
Oh God, this is a hard one for me just because of nostalgia always unfortunately rates high. I don't know.
Rose-colored glasses. I know what you mean.
Yeah. It's hard because I hold it in such high regard in my memories, but going back and watching it this time around, there were some things that I really loved, and there were some things that really stuck out to me that didn't age well, I guess, for me. And I don't mean age well as in like I was insulted. I just didn't like about it. I would have to say I would have to say with everything, the for me, CGI, VFX, props, everything like that always holds really high for me. So I would have to say I'd give it a 7.5 screaming Mel Gibsons out of 10. And that's just because Mel Gibson, although I am biased, I think he stands out as one of the better actors in that whole entire thing. Even the B listing actors are pretty good. Props are amazing. Props out for an MG34. Visual effects are great. The physical, I'm not using the word right. The real effects versus the CGI effects are fantastic. And it aged well. So I mean, like, I'd have to give it about a 7.5 probably, a total of like 0 to 10, 7.5. It's pretty stuck up there on my. If you told me, what Vietnam movie should I watch, I'd be like, intro level, I'd watch this,
Yeah, I kind of agree with both of you. I mean, it's hard to judge anything because judging is subjective. What do you take away from it? It's kind of like what we were talking about earlier with war is personal because it's what you experience and what you walk away with. I mean, there's a lot of things I could say about this film, even more in detail. I mean, there's a lot of historical inaccuracies, like Broken Arrow. That's a nuke that got stolen. The Vietnam War term was prairie fire. If you wanted all the ordnance dropped on top of you right now, you yelled prairie fire, and with no other radio signs into the radio, and you got everything on station, as support. I mean, this movie also only tells half the story of the Battle of the Drang. This is LZ X-Ray. There also was LZ Albany, which went on for another few days, and even more Americans got killed. I mean, I understand that you can't tell like a 4-day battle, 5-day battle in 2 hours, but it's something to take into consideration when really weighing the film. That said, it really has always been a middle of the road film for me as far as war and for Vietnam, and I have to really agree that like if somebody's really interested in Vietnam War movies, they've never seen anything, I'm like, you know what, watch We Were Soldiers. Not because it's like about the first battle of the war. That's a good starting point anyway, but just because it just does a good job at what it was made for. Just to tell a story about the Vietnam War, in home front and overseas. So yeah, if I had to give it a rating, I'd have to say 6.5, just because it's it's not a bad movie. It's not like a excellent end all, like in my opinion, like Paths of Glory or something like that. Like, oh my god, like you couldn't do anything to make this better. You would just make it worse. But it's just a great middle of the road film. Like if you want to enjoy it, if you just like want to watch about Vietnam, like if you just want something to throw on that you'll get enjoyment out of, you will. At some point of this film, like be happy that you watched it. There's not really many demeaning factors.
I would have to say it's like it's very hard for me to go like I fucking don't like this. Like it's very hard for me to do that, and I always my first always thing for a movie, any movie, is did it entertain me, and this movie entertains. It's we're persnickety, we're history nerds, we're film nerds, we're everything. We pick apart stuff, but like in the end, like someone poured their heart and soul into this thing on all different fronts: editing, practical effects, practical effects, CG effects, editing, directing, everything. Like this was someone they poured their soul into, and you got to respect that. And so this is a good movie overall. I think it's fantastic
for sure.
So.
Yeah, it's
just hard to shit on. I agree with you. We could pick it apart, like I was just saying, but it just at the end of the day, it does what it was made for. It's a Vietnam War film. That's it. It's not like Red Tails, which is just horrible because it's horrible. Yeah, sad. We need better films about minorities in war. It just pisses me off.
Yeah.
But so yeah, drum roll. I think that we can all agree that this film is a 6.75 out of 10.
Yeah. Do the math.
Yeah. So I hope that everyone listening to this enjoyed it. We will be doing another episode very shortly on the film Outpost, which is a current film that came out through Netflix, and it's written from a book, or it's adapted from a book from a very famous CNN reporter, if I remember correctly.
And they had the vets. They had the vets that were there at the event actually, either acting or giving a lots of advice. So
that's cool.
It's definitely got a real. It's got a high promise to being pretty good. Hopefully.
Yeah,
I personally haven't seen it, and I don't think you have either, Brian. Right?
Yeah, no. So it'd be interesting to get a fresh slate on it. TNT hasn't ruined it for me yet, so we'll just have to see how it is. Yeah, right. So thank you for joining us. Hope to hear you or hear us again, and until the next time, guys. Scuttlebutt out.